right.
Hello, and welcome to another Healthy Living presentation from Massey Cancer Center's Integrative Health Program. I'm Dr. Susan Chandler, and with us today is Jason Callahan, chaplain for the Thomas Palliative Care Unit at Virginia Commonwealth University's Massey Cancer Center. Jason also serves as an adjunct instructor for the departments of patient counseling and pastoral care at VCU. He was the first chaplain endorsed by the Humanist Society to become a board-certified chaplain through the Association of Professional Chaplains. Jason is a public voice for humanism and has appeared on podcasts and radio programs discussing humanism and chaplaincy work. He has served as a plenary speaker at national conferences for both the Association of Professional Chaplains and at the Spiritual Care Association. He's been a celebrant and chaplain of the Humanist Society since 2015 and on its board since 2020. His ultimate goal is to put professional chaplains in every community in the country, and good luck with that. Jason, thank you so much for being here today.
And thank you, Susan, very much. And as you all may see, I already got some slides pulled up. I'm Jason Callahan. Thank you so much for the introduction. Just want to talk a little bit today about what it's like to go through a crisis and what some of the resources are available to you all as you're dealing with those crises. And this is from a chaplain standpoint. I'm not sure of everyone's involvement or integration with the pastoral services here in the hospital. However, I will be providing you all with a couple of resources as well as our phone number, just in case you want to get in contact with the chaplain, myself, or any one of our team members. So right now we're going to talk a little bit about suffering. So what exactly is that? And according to Dr. Eric Castle, it's a specific state of severe distress induced by the loss of integrity, intactness, cohesiveness, or wholeness of the person, or by a threat that the person believes will result in the dissolution of his or her integrity. So what that means, it involves bearing physical, psychosocial, spiritual, existential challenges that affect the quality of life. Every single dimension that you're talking about, we can have suffering in that aspect. It's not just physical. It's only through the relief of this suffering that you can really live a full and healthy and functional life as much as possible. Here in the healthcare systems, we often talk about the quantity of life, how we're going to extend that. But what we fail to do quite often is talk about the quality of that. In attending to the suffering, we hope to help resolve some of those quality issues. Patients and loved ones who have or who care for someone who has a chronic or terminal illness can also experience distress when the suffering becomes prolonged or unrelieved. Empathy is one of those things that allows us to really connect with other individuals. And as a caregiver, undoubtedly, you're going to have a response to the physical health crisis of someone else. So it's important as a chaplain that we attend not only to the patients, but also to the family members, as well as the staff, because the staff are responsible for providing some of those direct care. How do patients reveal that suffering? I know a lot of times we expect someone to just answer a question, but in reality is not everybody works that way. In fact, most people have a mixture of communication tools that they use in order for us to truly know what they're experiencing. Many patients are reluctant to admit just how much distress they're experiencing from their serious or terminal illness. A lot of times it's because we want to make other people happy or because we're in denial ourselves. Patients often want to appear compliant and grateful for the help of their medical team, so it can be difficult to express to their care providers that they're struggling at all. It's also important to attend to that patient's affect as well as the words they're using to describe how they feel. So sometimes you'll hear that, "I'm just fine, thanks for asking." But unfortunately, their physical signs are showing something else. In this example, we use a grimace on their face as if they're in pain. I know a lot of times we'll look at the burrowed frown. I work in palliative care, and that's one of the ways that we can identify pain in the patient who's unable to communicate. The same applies even before they get to that point. Statements of distress and signs of suffering that come through in a patient or loved one's affect are a prompt for the clinician to express compassion and empathy while exploring the meaning behind the patient's question. A lot of times it's in that exploration that we actually get to the meat of the problem. And once we do that, we can also start developing a little bit more trust and build our relationships more, because the patient is able to see that we have an interest in that. So how do we respond to some of this suffering? Well, all the members of the interdisciplinary team are trained to respond to the suffering of the patients and their loved ones. It's not just the chaplains, it's everyone there who shows empathy. Even though chaplains are trained to educate and mentor the team in recognizing emotional, spiritual, and existential signs of suffering, we're not the ones who it's only our responsibility. We help the team engage in self-reflection to identify and tend to suffering within themselves so that they can best attend to others. So this is the vicarious way that chaplains will provide support to patients that we can't see, is making sure that we help unpack a lot of the things that our staff members who are in direct contact with the patient's experience as well. One of the ways that you can combat some of that suffering is finding hope. It's a powerful antidote to it. Things that the patients and families hope for might change over time as their illness progresses, but for most people, hope's an available resource for coping with difficult illness trajectories. A lot of times when you're in a crisis, it's kind of hard to see where you have some of those things that can help lift you up through that crisis, but helping to retell that story, identifying where the hope is, can provide you all with a little bit more resources in order to cope while we're managing some of the other minute intricacies of whatever they're experiencing. Clinicians attend to suffering, they show up, they acknowledge, stand witness, and facilitate moments of joy and comfort. And although they can't always resolve the suffering, we have the power to companion patients and families through their journey through life's most challenging moments. So that's just one way of saying, just even being there, being present is one way that you can help combat it. And in the presence, we'll find some space for something else in there as well. Now, it takes an entire team, obviously, in order to do this kind of thing. So here's some of the interdisciplinary interventions that we have for suffering. Some of them you'll see from medical staff, some of them you'll see from chaplains, social workers, and the like. But obviously, the pain and symptom management. We want to make sure that we're addressing those kind of things. Life reviews is something that a chaplain quite often is going to do, because in retelling your story, you can see that you're not just defined by what you're experiencing in the moment, but the totality of your life is really what matters. And in understanding that, we can find, where the value is in your history to help you cope. Also, support for medical decision-making. I know a lot of people come in and we might ask you, do you have a medical decision maker, a medical power of attorney? Have you done an advance directive? Chaplains, social workers, we are trained in order to facilitate those conversations. And the hope is that not only will it help us document the go-to people with the specific medical interventions you seek at certain points, but also it gives you an opportunity to tell your story. A lot of times just talking about these things will allow us to identify other things that we need to know in support of you. It's not just medical decision-making as far as advanced directives, but also we can assist you with the post form as well. Integrative therapies, spiritual support, obviously, ethical decision-making. A lot of times it's hard to make decisions, but we can also have family meetings where some of that family counseling happens. You'd be surprised to find out just how much we're dealing with auxiliary things, things that might be on the outside and not specifically being treated, like addiction. So if that comes out in one of our sessions, then obviously we'll try to provide some holistic support in that as well. But also things like dignity therapy. Dignity therapy is a way for someone to leave a legacy, a lasting impression of their life that is not just defined by their crisis moment. Chaplains will help you explore that. Some other things like mindfulness, guided imagery, and even art and music therapy. I myself am not an artist. I claim I can sing, but there are people in this hospital that are much better at doing that kind of stuff and we can use those tools to help support as well. A chaplain will come by and make sure that we're aware of these kind of dynamics, and we'll get the interdisciplinary team in that realm if we have to as well. Now, as facilitators of the spiritual care, we don't own spirituality. Each healthcare discipline has its own rich history of incorporating spirituality into professional practice. As a palliative care chaplain, I can say that our team tends to do this well. We have an understanding that this is a part of the dynamic of the human experience. So you're going to see that a little bit more in our physicians. Although I am the chaplain who's trained for more complex interventions, everybody's a part of the spiritual care team. As the spiritual care experts, chaplains support the spiritual care provided by the other members, as I already stated. And we address the higher level of spiritual care needs with expertise gained through graduate level education and chaplaincy training. I will tell you that not all chaplains are equal. When you come to a healthcare institution like VCU, you're going to find yourselves interacting with board certified chaplains. So these are chaplains who are very specifically trained in order to deal with the dynamics of healthcare specific needs. And we are governed by a professional group that makes sure that we perform to the highest standards. So you're getting someone who's trained just like every other medical professional who comes in here. One of the big things in addressing a crisis moment is acknowledging fears and concerns. One of the most common emotions that arises at the time of crisis is fear of the unknown, which is related quite often to end-of-life illness and a death. Anticipatory grief is one of those things that folks deal with a lot. When you're experiencing a crisis, it may trigger you into thinking about another event, maybe in your family's history that happened, and it's hard to not project into this experience what has happened in the past. But acknowledging that fear is one of the things that chaplains will help you do, and we'll work with that. Patients, families, and staff may not know what to expect if they have not experienced that before. I know I mentioned some of the previous family experiences that someone might have had, but if they haven't had these experiences, that fear of the known, not knowing what to do or what this thing even looks like, can be crippling sometimes. So chaplains will be able to work with you with that as well. But also the team uses an interdisciplinary approach to explore the origin of fear and assist the patients, families, and of course the staff in processing fears and emotions. Now here's a chart of some of the most common kind of fears. And I know if we look at this, I mean, I myself have experienced this, not just as a caregiver, but also as someone who's gone through health crisis in my family before. So feeling these emotions and being able to relate to them. But, you know, for the patient, just being in pain or fear of suffering. I don't know if you've ever been breathless before, but that can induce a lot of anxiety. Other things like if they're being cared for at home, you know, will family be able to control their symptoms? Because a lot of times family members are called upon to support, but they're not experts. Financial stresses obviously can be huge at the time. And when you have to pay medical bills, you know, that's going to be a huge burden. The healthcare staff, it's fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. Obviously, they're in this practice because they want to help people, but sometimes mistakes are made or the fear of failure. Also, you may be overcome with emotion. When I mentioned anticipatory grief before, it's not just something that family members and patients experience, but also staff members who have come to know and love the patients that they care for. Patients' loved ones, of course, they may not know how to act or what to expect around a dying person. And I mentioned this not just for a dying person, but someone who's experiencing a crisis that they haven't experienced before. They may fear showing too much emotion or upsetting their loved one. Quite often, information is given to loved ones that is not shared with patients in order to help prepare them to communicate with patients and vice versa. But this can induce a lot of anxiety as well. Now we're going to get into spiritual distress specific stuff in a second here. And here are some of the common sources of spiritual distress. Things like guilt, shame, or forgiveness issues. A lot of times we see this in a crisis moment because it becomes a focus because we don't know what to expect. We don't know how much time we have to resolve issues. Broken and damaged relationships with faith, tradition, or communities. Lack of a sense of meaning, and that's a big one. We'll talk about meaning making in a little bit. And that's one of the things that chaplains do as well. But these are some of the common sources of spiritual distress. And chaplains not only help support staff members in addressing these things, but have more advanced interventions as well, if these things are preventing you from being able to move forward in whatever your medical treatment is. The spiritual care interventions are the heart of a full circle palliative care chaplaincy. As I said myself, I'm a palliative care chaplain. With thoughtful spiritual care interventions, we can mediate hope, cultivate compassion, and bring healing and reconciliation to places of brokenness, fractured meaning in the lives of patients and their loved ones. Ultimately, we want to be able to provide a plan that has interventions involved in it in order to address within the total scope of what we're trying to treat, address the spiritual need. Once that plan is constructed, the specific spiritual care plan and chaplain provides interventions based on the evidence based practices and the chaplain's own gain experience as a reflective practitioner. Now, some of the basic things that we'll do, we'll draw from foundational spiritual care interventions like the following: reflective listening. So as a chaplain goes in and we listen intently to someone, we'll just make sure that we clarify what we've heard so that we're right on with the patient. Communication is huge in treating patients, obviously, to get the results and the outcomes that we seek, but also in helping us avoid some of the things that could actually cause harm to the folks we care for. Non-judgmental regard for cultural and religious differences. Obviously, not everyone's the same. We have to take cultural and religious differences in consideration anytime we provide care for someone. If we provide some care to someone outside of the context of their experience and their expectations, then sometimes we're doing damage to the relationship, but also causing other kinds of harm that we may not know about. Appropriate use of self-disclosure. Just remembering this ain't about us, but it's about the people that we care for. Rapport building, obviously, empathy is obviously a huge thing that all staff members are expected to have, but chaplains more specifically have to be empathic in order to provide support to the team and the people we're caring for, but also the ability to be present to silence without filling the space for words. We can sit in the silent room all day. Chaplains are trained to deal with that stuff. Sometimes we think that we're fixing something by just filling the space, but quite often that space is something that needs to exist by itself. And we're masters at facilitating that space. Some of the more complex interventions, we'll talk about those as well. I mentioned before meaning making as one of the big things that we try to do. Now, the practice of chaplaincy is an art in meaning making. Okay, when patients and their loved ones face serious illness, the fabric of meaning, which brings life purpose and a sense of coherence, may become fractured and frayed. Meaning-making interventions require that the chaplain maintains an openness to unforeseen possibilities and allowing the care seeker to explore their own world of meaning. Remember what I said before. Yes, this thing that you're going through, this crisis, it is happening, but it does not define you. So how are we going to create meaning, not only for your life and all, but what's happening right now, and where does that fit within that context? So what is meaningful to the chaplain may not have resonance with the care seeker. So we're not going to project ourselves. I myself, as a palliative care chaplain, provide non-judgmental transitional space for new meaning to emerge in often new and surprising ways in the context of love and support. Now, here's some of the meaning-making interventions, and anybody can do this, but chaplains are trained specifically to do these at a more advanced level. So deep listening, like we said before, making sure that you're providing full attention to patients, staff, other care providers. This provides the foundation for the reweaving of that meaning. You have to know exactly what we've heard in order to help someone move forward. Spiritual and emotional support and counseling. Although chaplains are not licensed professional counselors, we do provide more spiritual kind of counseling. We want to make sure that we're doing that, not just ourselves, but making sure that social workers as well who are trained in order to do that, we incorporate them if needed. Life reviews. You know, a lot of times when somebody's dealing with a critical illness, you know, they really have to process what's going on, not just now, but in totality of their lives. So helping us kind of look at that is a way that we can help them find themselves in the crisis. A lot of times you'll be able to reveal strengths or different coping resources that they forgot they had or just haven't approached. But also dignity therapy. Dignity therapy is an advanced intervention. Max Chashanov, he goes by Max, but his name's Harvey. He really has used dignity therapy in a lot of his work. This is a more advanced intervention that requires not just, you know, one visit, but a series of visits in order to produce what's called a generativity document. And that's something that folks can leave behind if they're approaching the end of life or just want to make sure that their legacies are left for their family members. As far as a palliative care chaplain goes, some of the more complex things that we provide, and this would be more for folks that are further down the line, not necessarily just finding out about their illness, but folks who are dealing with advanced illness, identifying and addressing ethical dilemmas and conflicts. A lot of times, this is in relationship to decision-making. as well, but also in making the right decisions for yourself, specifically if you're dealing with religious specific stuff. I know, for example, if you're Jehovah's Witness, part of advanced care planning and the medical decision-making part is Jehovah's Witnesses quite often will have their own advanced care plan that fits within the confines of their belief system. Unfortunately, sometimes that goes against what medical professionals would believe, but we have to be able to work with those kind of things. And the chaplain will come in to help assist with that. In assisting in interdisciplinary team and assessing for decisional capacity. We are not psychologists or psychiatrists, but we can kind of help people see what is more of a base level response. You may not have the decisional capacity to tell what kind of interventions you want done, but you may have decisional capacity to say who your go-to person is. And we can help identify that based on life review and finding out more about the patients. Facilitating family meetings, obviously. This is something that we encourage because we want to make sure everybody who is a part of that team is on board at the same time. And I know we already kind of brought up dignity therapy, but that's a huge one that I like to use as a more advanced intervention. Another thing that we will do if you need assistance is work on ethical wills. An ethical will is a way of capturing one's legacy and passing on one's values and one's legacy to future generations. This is kind of a lot like the dignity therapy that Chaplain was doing. One way of thinking of an ethical will is as a love letter to the patient's loved ones. So this is something that they will be leaving behind, not when they're gone, but hopefully that they'll be able to share this with their loved ones while they're still living as well. Ethical wills can contain important personal values and beliefs, spiritual values, hopes, life lessons, love, and forgiving others and asking for forgiveness. So it goes hand in hand with the dignity therapy. The ethical will, we quite often will call that a generativity document. One of the other things that we'll do is work with family systems. Family systems theory provides a helpful way for engaging family dynamics as they unfold for patients with a serious illness. We kind of have to know where all the major players fall in line, and quite frankly, families tend to follow specific paths. There are common personalities and different things that go into play, and working within that system, understanding who operates and what capacity is important as well. Obviously, family systems interventions may include bringing attention to the family dynamics in a compassionate way to encourage more awareness and flexibility with dynamics as they impact patient well-being, which is just another nice way of saying, let's find out who the go-to person is. So if there's a troublemaker in the family and there's specific reasons, then we can work with that person because we're able to identify where they are in the family system. We talk about the black sheep down here, just another one of the roles, but working within the family system, something the chaplain will help you do. One of the big things, and sometimes, people may wonder, well, how does the chaplain help with, physical pain and stress management? And we're not physicians, we're not docs. I'm not gonna, write you any kind of prescriptions for pills or anything, but the psychosocial dynamics that one experiences in a crisis actually goes hand in hand with the pain that they experience as well. So some of the things that the chaplain might do is work on guided imagery and visualization. Meditation practice is a big thing that we'll do. So we'll help guide you in meditation, but also just mindfulness. If you're unable to connect with the reality of what you're experiencing, then you're not going to experience it to fullness. You're probably not going to be able to make full and informed decisions, but helping you be present in that moment without the distractions is another one of the things that the chaplains will do. Here's some mind-body interventions that we mentioned before: mindful self-compassion, body scanning. I do that a lot with our chaplains, so they can do that with others. Grounding practices, relaxation techniques, and yes, even yoga. I'm not a big fan of the use of touch, but some people, and I know some volunteers, may do things like energy work, Reiki, and that kind of thing. And massage therapy is one of those things that some people will do as well. Spiritual counseling, I mentioned that before. Although we are not licensed professional counselors when you come through your chaplaincy training, we are attuned to some of the counseling needs, and we will refer to people if we have to. Spiritual and religious beliefs can significantly impact the patient's experience of their pain. Right here, we have our phone number. This is the Department of Pastoral Care that's in the healthcare system. We work very closely with not only the cancer center, but every unit in the hospital. So even if you're coming, if you know a family member that's not oncology related and they're just looking for someone to contact the chaplain, this is our number, 804-828-0928. You can also contact the chaplain by using the paging system as well. And a couple of resources that I wanted you all to have. The top websites here, these are more grief, anticipatory grief, and even post-death grief related websites. Full Circle Grief Center, this first one right here is an awesome site, and it maintains a huge resource manual, not just for post-death, but also just dealing with crisis. And if you're somebody who uses your cell phone a lot, one of the really good apps to use is Headspace. 10% Happier is also a good one, but Headspace is one that staff members can use if they get a break, and family members and patients can actually use this as well in order to just kind of help process and cope with what's going on. That is the end of my presentation.
Well, Jason, you really delivered. Your presentation was entitled Coping Resources for Crises, and oh my goodness, you really left us with a varied and extensive list of resources. We will post those resources in your last slide to our Massey Integrative Health website, so that viewers will be able to access them. And I jotted down a few notes as you were speaking. Who knew how complex this time could be, particularly in a palliative care setting? You mentioned some things such as dignity therapy and ethical wills, and of course the importance of family dynamics. We tend, I think, to think of suffering in that setting, but there's so much more going on. Is that something you want to speak to just a little bit?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned it before, how patients will allude to things being okay. So superficially, we're able to kind of support them. But a lot of times there's something underneath that's going in there. And you mentioned the ethical wills and the dignity therapy. And those are just opportunities for those things to kind of come out. But if they don't have the platform by which that can come out, essentially what you have is that existential distress is going to remain because they just don't have the environment to do it. That's one of the reasons that we hope folks will use chaplain services a lot earlier on, because we're not just for end of life situations, but we're there from the very beginning so that these very dynamics can start being worked with. And what you'll see is that, there's alleviation of suffering. And that also impacts the way somebody experiences the physical experience as well.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you clarified that is something that we do often see, is that people seem to make the assumption that so many of the services are for the very end of life, but think about how much suffering can be alleviated or transformed, certainly if you are contacted beforehand. I also kept thinking as you were speaking about hope. There are so many opportunities here to provide hope in the midst of a crisis. And so circling back to some of your very first comments about hope, and I certainly thank you for being here today and making our viewers aware of how much hope there can be in the midst of suffering, and just as importantly, what a valuable role the chaplain brings as a member of this interdisciplinary team. So thank you, Jason, so much for being here with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.